thinker about transportation. He has worked at various companies. He was director of new mobility for Frog Design, and many of his ideas have now become incorporated in those of other companies. He was one of the creators of the neighborhood electric vehicle, which you saw here in the video that were brought in for the teenagers to basically chop up and remake. The NEV and the company that Dan created called Trans2 are now owned by Daimler Chrysler. And Dan has been recognized with numerous awards, including as a member of the ID magazine, ID 40, and in features in various newspapers. And we will hear exactly why we brought him here for Design Camp and many other projects to come. Dan, over to you.
Thank you. I guess the mics are all working. I brought my little plastic spoon because when they told me I had 15 minutes too, I thought, oh, I could talk about this for 2 weeks. So I thought of Baskin & Robbins, that little spoon you get to taste all the little flavors. I'm going to have to move real quickly through this. So here goes. I won't explain it all. I think we're having questions and answer sessions later, and because I'm trying to go beyond the transportation system element and think about our new digital age and how we can live differently. And I should set that up. We talk now about mobility, and I think there's a lot of different definitions about mobility. But I think about transportation as sort of going from point A to point B, and then I should have my cell phone in my hand, which is in my bag over there. Once I got my cell phone, I didn't have to sit by my desk waiting for the phone to ring, and that allowed me to move in different places. So it wasn't just about, well, I have a mic here. I think I'm also okay, because I'll be walking out there a little shortly. But ultimately, I should be able to leave my desk in a new mobility age because I can be more nomadic. And that's not just a point A to point B story anymore. And so it changes, I think, really profoundly the opportunities of how we shape our world in terms of whether we have offices and we have homes and how that blurs together. Anyways, I'm going to just kind of rant and go at this thing here. When I talk about, and I should back up there, ecology kind of represents to me digital and environmental issues. I think before the Twin Towers went down in New York and terrorism became a big topic, the two biggest stories over the last decade were probably ecology, environment, and then digital. That's what we saw most of the covers on our magazines. So I'm going to kind of talk about our big problems and our great technology of how to solve those big problems. When I go to a dinner party and mention electric cars, you know, I get all this stuff about hybrid cars, fuel cell, electric cars. And I get it, and you saw it in some of the video earlier of where I'm going with this conversation already. All the major car companies have spent considerable sums of money, you know, in the billions of dollars now have been spent on these kinds of cars. So it was fun about 2 months ago in Los Angeles. That's my brother Joe. And I was given a General Motors electric car, which GM spent, I think, almost $1 billion developing that. There was only about somewhere, well, I know it was less than 1,000 ever made it to California. And California has 27 million cars, so 1,000 really is not going to do much of a good thing. But they tried, and they made this incredible car. But so Joe got in it, my brother, and he drove around a little bit, and he really liked this thing. It's really sweet. I mean, if you get a chance to ride an EV1, it's a great thing to experience. And you can start it with these little keys. You don't even need a regular key, and it's a great experience. So this was our afternoon in Los Angeles a little while back. And then I left Joe, and I was driving through downtown LA on the 101, and you can see me taking a picture of myself in the car, and that was the traffic. And this is kind of common in all of our major urban centers today. So there I was in a car with 60-mile range, and a lot of people talk about the range issues with electric vehicles, but they're not talking that the car is going 0 on a 65-mile-an-hour freeway. So, cut to the scooter. When I went to high school in Boulder, Colorado, I couldn't afford my car, so I got a scooter. And I always kind of wondered why there was nothing more than a scooter but less than a car. And to me, that was a big gap. But I know that our whole world is very car-focused. We're focused around cars, and we have over 90% of the people going to work in America tomorrow morning, or today is, I guess, Saturday, so Monday morning, will be going by car. We don't really have all that many viable forms of alternative transportation. So I started to look at this gap over 20 years ago between the scooter and the car. How come I couldn't buy a car without a bumper to save money? People said that's not safe, but I could buy the scooter. So it's kind of hard to understand. Or I could buy a high performance Kawasaki Ninja or whatever motorcycle. So the vehicle that I worked to create is a vehicle that fills that gap, and it became the neighborhood electric vehicle. And if you go down to, I think it's in Carlsbad, California, they have Legoland. And you go into Legoland and you look at this one room where these kids invent cars. And there's all these amazing different cars. Some have wheels, some fly, or they do all these different things, but these kids have all this imagination. Our vehicle became the first new class of motor vehicle in the United States since 1973, and by NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And it's like an evolved golf cart. That's all it really is. But it shows there's been no diversity in transportation options in terms of vehicles in this country. So this is my first prototype. If I could go back and I had enough time, I'd show you the first little model that sat in my house that I made one night, getting this thing ready. And this was a bad Polaroid from 1993. This was the first neighborhood electric vehicle that we made with my little group of partners that we'd put together. And then this was about a month ago in Fargo, North Dakota, where they make the cars, and not cars really, neighborhood electric vehicles. But for me, I'm probably the happiest guy going into Fargo because there's 8 buildings dedicated to my little vehicles there. And they haven't changed them. And Daimler Chrysler has invested a lot of money in this operation, and they've stuck with this design, even though it needs to be evolved like anything does. But I've watched from that little clay model to factories filled with these little cars. And it's been an amazing experience, but there was no company that came to us and said, will you build this for us? I had to go out and become not just a designer, but an entrepreneur. I had to learn about business, and I had to figure out ways to get these things together to happen, because I found that I had more ideas than the people that were leading the various car companies, and they weren't thinking in these ways. So since I started this effort and had my partners and we did all this work, there's been about $250 million around the United States invested into this sector. I will show you in a second a little quick movie of, it's really bad audio and whatnot, but it gives you a feel of these vehicles and how they're fitting into the communities in California now. This is actually at an Air Force base that the cars are running around. And this is Coronado, California, and I could take up my whole time just showing you all the different applications that the vehicles are being used in. I think there's about 18,000 of them now out there. There's been other people trying to get into this sector too, but it's been difficult for all of us. It's been very hard to kind of introduce a vehicle that's not as fast, not as capable. It's a slower, less vehicle, and we're a society that's always used to more, more, more. So it's been a very difficult process, but that's why I'll talk about the need for systems. This is a Canadian company. They went bankrupt. Ford invested, I think, over $80 million in this one, and it's no longer around. Honda has been messing with this thing, but they haven't understand how to bring it forward yet. This is when I've been driving in Colorado now, just trying it out, and it's a 3-wheeler, but it's a lot better than just a motor scooter. You're enclosed and you're warm, but there's only been 100 made, and it's in Oregon. This is Bombardier, who got into the sector after us and tried to buy my company, and they spent about $40 million, I think, and then left the market. Nissan is trying to get into faster vehicles, more capable vehicles. But again, these are vehicles not for the freeways. Any car outside your driveway right now you could pick up and drive to Florida. These vehicles don't do it. It takes a whole different mindset. And this is Toyota Ecom, which also Toyota's been exploring with, but it's very difficult because the Toyota U.S. operations are essentially a dealer operation. And I've driven this vehicle around the parking lots of Torrance headquarters, Toyota headquarters, and I've had people sneer at me and think it was really horrible that I was in this little Toyota product. It was like, okay. So what this really comes down to, and Lawrence has talked about it too, is it's really about the new way of moving in our new age and how digital applies to our area of movement. And you're obviously getting 2 different channels on how to approach that. In Europe right now, some of you have heard of car sharing now. Now you can take a car just like at your hotel that you swipe the door, and you can go down to a station and just pick a car. The people in Switzerland can go down to a station. I think there's now 50,000 people car sharing in Switzerland, and you just go down to the station and you pick a different car. And I always pull up my ugly shoe at this point, because when you go to your closet next time, right now, going to a dealer in America to buy a car for 3 years is like going down and picking one shoe for 3 years. And the ability to pick different vehicles, to rent them on demand. So instead of having the multi-purpose car, which is like one tool, the guy with his one tool that'll do everything, it's going in with a toolbox and being able to pick the tools that you want to do this. This is what you're going to start to see, and I think in our communities and our cities is, it's hard to imagine it sort of, but many, many, many airports, intermodal centers that have to be easier for people to move around. This is little cars in Japan that can dock up at a factory or dock up next to a train. This is BART, California, Carling project with a lot of different partners, including Honda, looking at how this future is going to come out. When you see the struggles my little electric vehicles have had, there's also been a lot of struggles with car sharing. In fact, all the new innovations I'll show you taking place right now have all had a lot of struggles. But it's a synergy kind of a thought. I visited a Rocky Mountain Institute with Amory Levins not long ago, and they started talking about their house that they built. And they showed this 3 panes of glass window. And they said, if you bought that and put it in your house, it'd be a waste of your money. If you bought the ceiling material and bought it alone and put it in your house, a waste of money. But if you start putting that glass with that ceiling material, before you know it, you're sending power back to the grid. So it's all about synergy. Car share, another one, e-delivery. We've seen Webvan in California go out of business with about $1 billion invested. I mean, that was not a little project. Somebody lost $1 billion trying to do e-delivery. But it's going to happen. It's all been being done piecemeal. We want people to get on transit, but look at our buses. I mean, every vehicle that Lawrence showed us, I mean, I've never seen a straight line on any of the new cars that we buy. The Audi TTs and all the cars that we like all have these wonderful little shapes, but our buses are like designed to move cattle or something. I don't get it. There's some effort being made now to make buses look like light rail or more like Porsche designed them, and that's going to be a good effort, but we're just beginning that. And I think what we can now buy with our wireless internet is really what you need for this kind of vision that I'm talking about, this ability to be able to just get off that sexy bus and pick any vehicle you want for that one trip, all with different pricing. It's all here today. While everyone will talk about fuel cells as someday, maybe in 10 years, we'll have a great life, all the things I'm talking about today are available to us. This was a vehicle that's just voted as one of the worst show cars in Europe, and it was I really liked the look of this thing. It's kind of wild, but the thing about it back was almost profound, because the idea was, the bottom picture, you see somebody holding their little wireless device there, wireless web device. If they're walking down the street, I'm walking 2 miles that way, and the car now can recognize it, and with those 24/7 like dashes, they see me, we can talk to each other, and I can get a ride, basically hitchhiking. And not just hitchhiking, I can pay for part of the ride. So if Lawrence checks out his 24/7 and he's driving 2 miles and he's taking a car sharing car and it's going to cost him $3 for the trip, I can get in the car and my cell phone will pick up $1.50 of the trip or whatever. And so it's a hybrid of transit taking shape. So what we're getting to is designer mobility systems. I think if you're going to look around for the next Model T next year, it's not going to be a car. It needs to be a system, because that's where we're going. This feeder vehicle that we're starting to look at, our little vehicle now, is a feeder vehicle in San Diego and some of the California communities. So if you try to put these things together, why does transit not work well in America? If you take a bus to a suburb of Minneapolis and you go into someone's house, but their house is 2 miles off that transit stop, how do I go that last 2 miles? It's very inconvenient. But if I can rent a very inexpensive little vehicle to go the last 2 miles, it makes it much more appropriate and convenient for people. Likewise for van pooling or even car rental or car sharing centers. If you had to put car sharing centers in Irvine, California, it's so spread out, the sprawl, you couldn't afford to put many centers in, and people couldn't get to the centers, so you need the small vehicles. And the small vehicles need the destination. They need the tasks to be successful. So basically, this is Davis, California, where you already have neighborhood centers, those circles, which is already happening. This is basically my Shareware big vision, where you talk about how you can move around a neighborhood community. You have a center, you can get into car sharing, you can get onto a van. The important thing to say here is, if I ride to work with someone in a van pool, right now it's not very attractive because I get to work, the person who drove me is gone, now I need to go somewhere. But if you put that car rental, car sharing at the work site too, you actually retain mobility once you get there, and it makes shared rides of all different natures much more convenient for people. This is a quick little animation just to show the idea of these things coming together. Here's, the bottom layer is the big car driving to the big box retail. Up above is the little car. If you start having e-delivery come to your house every day, well, that ends up being expensive. So the little car going down to the mobility center where the packages can make a one-stop drop, which is a lot cheaper ultimately. And ultimately, 2 cars in the garage is $38 a day. I mean, if you look at AAA's quote of $7,000 a car per year, so that's like every night after work. And the car man comes, I can see him up there. Car man comes and says, $38 please for these two cars. Next night, $38. Next night, $38. Through the weekend, $38. And then someone orders a package off the internet, and guess what? You're going to pay for FedEx to come to your house, and then, well, it may not be $38 because you didn't drive that car to the store, but it's going to be close to it because you're still paying all this cost. So ultimately, shrinking that one car, getting a bigger garage, whatever, is part of the future here. I live in Boulder, Colorado now, and this is my little house. And it's 1.1 miles to the main commercial center where I can do everything and get everything, pretty much anything I need. And it takes me 18 minutes to walk, and it takes 3 minutes in a neighborhood electric vehicle, 25-mile-an-hour souped-up golf cart. And that's my garage. And what we're talking about is the car being this bridge across, but it's very heavy and very expensive. And now we're talking about these stepping stones. And in the past, we've only had walking and biking, and the steps have been too big for people to make. So I talk about all these things coming together, from transit, urban design, the digital technologies, car sharing type things, and the subcars, the smaller vehicles. This is Otay Ranch, where some of these things are going into practice in San Diego. This is a very quick little video. Oops, I have to back it up because you need the audio, sorry. This is a very quick little video just shot.
We were tired of just our typical subdivisions like the one that I live in and the other subdivisions out here. We wanted to do something different. And we knew about the new urbanism concepts that were coming on, the urban village. We wanted more small town America type of thing. Associations that don't like each other.
This is the largest plant in California?
Yes, it is. So we're in a brand new village. This is different than the other one. Same concept. A core. High density, multifamily uses surrounding a core area for a transit stop right in the middle. The middle of this median has been set aside for the trolley. Okay. So that median's already dedicated to it.
So you get the idea. Playa Vista is another community in LA we're working with. We're bringing smart cars in there. I'm not directly, but it's kind of happening. And so you'll have stations where the little vehicles can move around, and then they can go to these other stations to get cars to go all over the LA region. These are people in Celebration, Florida that are driving our vehicles. In Celebration, I've been involved from the very get-go. This is like surveillance camera at night of the vehicle driving around. This is a Disney town where they spent a lot of money developing it. And the new urbanist designers had done a great job to make a place where you didn't have to get in your car every day. But they didn't really think about how you could really get out of that second car until we came in with these kinds of solutions. So here's a woman who's she's a doctor, and she's head of the Celebration School. And we just told her that she could, we asked her about what her life is like in her neb, because she drives the gym every day. I think she talks.
I'm not a traveling salesman. I'm not out on Monday, back on Friday, and I seldom go long distances. I lived in Atlanta for 20 years prior to coming here, and I was putting between 24 and 30,000 miles a year on my car. Since I moved to Celebration, I have averaged 8,000 miles a year on my car, and the rest of it is snap miles. I just seldom.
So she goes from 24,000 miles a year down to 8. I mean, if we can do that across our cities, we're going to start getting somewhere. Mass transit, I was in California 2 weeks ago, and I saw this vehicle, the new Hummer. And so I have my little analogy here about weight. And this is a 12-pack of Coke, so sometimes, you can't hear me back here, can you? Sometimes I wonder, like when I showed you my house in Boulder, if my neighbor just buys a new Hummer and they decide, the daughter says, "Oh, Mom, we're having a party, will you go and get a 12-pack of Coke?" And the parent says, "Fine," and they start the new Hummer H2 up to drive that 1.1 miles. What I ask people sometimes is what is the weight of the Hummer in 12 packs? And if I put a bicycle is a little more than 2 of these 12 packs. And these things are heavy. If I throw one of these things to you guys, it's heavy. If I put 10 of them down, 10 of them comes up to about here on me. So if you want to know what the weight of a Hummer is, I put markings. I know you can't hear me for the movie, but that's fine. So you have 12, that's 10. And you go 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So we have this big volume here of 100. Let's add another 200. I mean, we got tremendous weight already. Another 300. Do you think we're close to the weight of the Hummer going down to get that 112 pack? Double that to 600, and then add 40. 640 12-packs of Coke to go down and get one 12-pack of Coke. Pepsi, sorry. Well, I don't want to. But the point here is SUVs are not bad vehicles. It's just they're bad when they're used for every trip. And so that's something I had to get off my chest there, sorry. You know, and so I think if, you know, we've got stuff going on. We know the Gulf War had to do with oil. We know we didn't go down to Rwanda to help out. We went to help Kuwait. It was about oil. And so this is an issue in transportation design that's impacting people's lives. People are dying for it. Are you ready to drive an H2 Hummer down to that 1.1 mile trip, ready to send your kids off to like a draft or whatever to go fight and be a part of that first launch into the cities in Iraq? And a big issue, and I don't have time to go into this, I can talk about it later, we know a lot of people have come to this SUV because our freeways have become crowded with trucks. This is Germany, I know, but in America, since we had just-in-time inventory in the late 70s, we took all of our goods movement, or a lot of it, from rail and put it into trucks. We had more trucks on the freeway, and now consumers had to respond, and they got bigger vehicles. Crash, designed to hit. So safety is a big part of what I'm trying to sell here. I mean, to have little vehicles without doors be a part of the future. Ultimately, we made this vehicle very tall so you could see it, in traffic and whatnot. But ultimately, this is the big, sloppy, messy social problem answer, is to put intelligence in our street. Because if I have the budget to put intelligence in my street in Boulder, my kids running around with a special watch will know when anyone comes down that street faster than they should, and they will be notified to look out for that person or to watch out. It's kind of big brother-ish kind of issues, but we can do it, and we can build safety without adding mass to these vehicles. So this could be your little Minnesota car, one coming up, I guess, a new NEV. This is the basic system I outlined. And then let me just switch to another channel. I know I'm about out of time, so I'm going to go real quickly through this. Mobiliture. The one thing I want to say is the average car in America is only being driven 1 out of 24 hours. So for 1 hour, it needs to be aerodynamic. The rest of the time, it's urban furniture. So if you put in Lauren's great system, and I love it, but if you put that into a vehicle and you're just going to use it for 1 hour out of 24 hours, it becomes an issue of the investment. So when I actually helped out on the Think vehicle, we talked about seats that would swivel and become like furniture in the community. This woman, Maria, is an architect in California, and she just started thinking about how these vehicles would come into her house someday, and she started to design a house where NEVs would drive right into the grocery, into the kitchen, and she's building it now. She's building her world's first NEV house that I know about. At Target, with some of the people that I've seen here, we've worked together to think about an idea of how little vehicles could configure and become part of an overall dwelling, or a kind of a lodge, as we call this. Zoom Room is a concept where we can think more about how our vehicles park and become places. And so the car body architecture needs to open or transform or be like a Volkswagen camper of sorts. So to get all this to happen, we just can't rely on going to the car dealer. We have to realize that this is an amazing thing. I'd like to have a design studio in space someday. That's my want, so if this is on TV. We've got huge issues. We only have 13% of the people on the earth that, have a car or have access to a car. So there's a huge population that wants to buy into this future of whatever, I don't even know what it's going to be. We've made a world. I was flying to California 2 weeks ago, and this was looking out the window of the plane, and we've made a world of pavement and all this by the car. The car became the design tool to shape our world. My little car, we tooled it up for just under $1 million, and that's less than it takes to create a ski boot. So this doesn't have to, you don't have to wait for Detroit to do this stuff. If Minneapolis or the Great Lake region wants to do something, it's totally available. This is my little 7-year-old drew this picture years ago of someone sitting at Kinko's making a car, I guess, and you can see the side of the thing, but I never asked him to draw it. He just, got it. These were all the people's new Beetles that were coming out. We're out in communities now talking about iMovies and trying to really engage people. I was in New York last week, talking to the Cooper Hewitt, which is the Smithsonian Museum, about creating a cross-disciplinary network. So can you imagine if your kid saw some design show in Nickelodeon next year, and your 10-year-old said, oh, I live in Minneapolis, and here's my zip code. And all of a sudden, by punching that into a website, all the different types of artists, designers, creative people within that zip code popped up onto the screen with a MapQuest kind of a thing. And you could see that what people did, you could see what their aspirations were, you could think of, and I call it the Sprout Network on the bottom, you could see which ones were willing to take an email from a kid. And you could be creating all kinds of new little transportation systems or whatever it's going to be. This is my last thing here. It's in 1992, I made the folding vehicle, and I was thinking about vehicles for China too. So 14 years ago, this is where I started after leaving General Motors. This was my little folding China vehicle, which is very simple. Sorry for the rant. It's just had to get it all in, right? This thing folds up though, so you could carry cargo, stand up, whatever, and when you're all done, the thing folds up and stores against the wall. So if you could imagine China actually thinking about all these telematic solutions and how to do all this stuff. And so that's it. You can put my name and design on any search engine. You get like 5 pages of things worth reading or not worth reading, I don't know. And then I get crazy sometimes. Sometimes I think cars are our heads, ideas are our cars. I get all mixed up, and I made a car out of my head. And so I call myself Carboy now. If Madonna can do it, I can too. Thank you.